again Mr. JB Padu, your instructor for the course of mobile game development, and now we are currently in module number 2. So in this topic for this week, we will be discussing the introduction to Game Maker Studio version 2. Okay, so far we have already have an overview upon the whole topics that we will be discussing in the following weeks. And mainly, one of these is the discussion that we will be mainly using the Game Maker Studio again, but this time it is the second version where it would provide a certain familiarity and ease of development for our current situation. And for the reason na yun nga, we still are in the pandemic situation. Okay? Okay? For our topic today for our week 2, which is Introduction to GMS2, here are our learning objectives that is required to be discussed for this week. The first one is to familiarize the Game Maker Studio 2 software on its workspace and its environment. So far, in this software, mainly we'll be focusing on the uh, uh, similarities and then differences between the version 1 and then version 2 of the software, and then the next one is to differentiate sprites, objects, and event components of the GMS2 engine, which is a topic that is simply a review from the GMS2 GMS1 software, understanding how sprites, objects, and event components are used to produce a functional and working game. So basically, this is a bit of an introduction, mainly similar to what we have already discussed, no, doon sa GMS1. But the only difference is we will be jumping from a software to another version of the software, and we will be familiarizing the changes that we will be providing, or this game engine will be providing for us. The next one is to explain how GMS2 rooms work to create multiple scenes, levels for your game, integrate the use of sound effects and background musics into your game. So basically, these are all of the things that will be included as the learning objectives for our topic in week number 2 for GMS2 introduction. For our topic outline, okay, so mainly we will be discussing the introduction and overview of the GMS2. We will be understanding and familiarizing the start page and the workspace under the game engine software. We will be introducing these following resources. I know some of you have already been familiarized for the GMS1 or the Game Maker Studio 1 version. So about this sprite objects and room resources. So mainly we would look at this at somewhat a chance for the others who probably didn't understand, or this is the first time who will be learning the development process under Game Maker Studio, which is under the sprite resources. What are sprite resources, object resources, room resources, and what do they do, and how they interact to one another to create a game in the Game Maker Studio software. The next one is under the sprite resources. We will be checking out the image editor for editing, updating, creating different sprite resources for our software. We will be introducing the tileset resource, which is, I believe, somewhat different from the Game Maker Studio 1 version that we have already discussed on the previous semester, and how to add the sound resources. And so far, this outline, kung nakikita ninyo, these are just basic, no? Because we are just simply introducing Game Maker Studio 2, and we will be targeting the flow of creating a basic or a simple game in Game Maker Studio with all of these resources and functions that are available. And now for the overview of the Game Maker Studio 2. On your PowerPoint, it is said that Game Maker Studio 2 is intended primarily as a tool for making 2D games or two-dimensional games. So for that is quite similar for what we have experienced when we have created games on the previous semester for Game Maker Studio version 1 on your iGameC. And mainly, 3D games are perfectly doable in Game Maker Studio 2. But so far, um, there are just certain limitations, unlike uh, using an actual game engine that is intended for creating 2D and 3D or both 2D and 3D targets and platforms for game development. But mainly, although 3D games are perfectly doable in Game Maker Studio 2, as what is said in the PowerPoint, it comes with a number of tools and editors to help you realize your dreams, ideas, with your final project being ported across multiple platforms. As we already know, Game Maker Studio, even on version 1, provides us the capability of targeting multiple platforms like uh, desktop computers or PCs, mobile devices like Android and iOS, for the same initial base resources. So mainly, we will just be familiarizing GMS2 as it is quite the same as GMS1, but only difference is the changes in the interface and how we interact with these resources along the way. Next, we will be discussing the Game Maker Studio interface. So mainly as you can see on the screen, it is quite different now. Um, Mainly, Game Maker Studio 2 offers an intuitive and easy use of drag and drop, which is the availability of the drag and drop feature, same as before. Interface of action icons that allow you to start creating your own games very quickly using visual scripting. So mainly, what is different now is, aside from the drag and drop functionality that we are aware of and familiarized from iGameC, uh, we now have this feature of Game Maker Studio, which is yung tinatawag natin na visual scripting. So visual scripting is, in a sense, it shows the outline of the different logic drag and drop objects that you add on each and every objects that you create. So mainly, as you can see here, for example, on the right side, you can see that I have assigned a variable, set a direction for a variable, uh, set the speed of the object, and then set an alarm countdown. What happens is, of all the values that are indicated and provided for each one of these events on the right side, you can see now on the Game Maker version 2 the outline or individual outline along with the values of the things that you have made under the object events. So mainly, as you can see, after assigning the variable which is 2000, it will show that the set countdown to 2000 from on the left side, and then set direction of variable, you can see the value same as well on the left side of the screen. So mainly, you can see this on the object mode while modifying and creating or formulating the functionalities for your object. Next, it has a proprietary scripting language, same as the previous version. I do believe some of you already dived into GML, which is the Game Maker language, wherein we will be using scripting functionalities for the Game Maker for us to provide game development or for us to provide uh, development of games in the programming perspective. It is not new. In Game Maker Studio 2, you can also even combine both the Game Maker language, which is your scripting language, along with the functionality of the D&D or the drag and drop actions that you have created on your objects or for the whole project or your whole game. This gives you a great deal of flexibility when it comes to how you write things, or mainly if, like, let's say, for the specific functionality, for the specific text, it is much easier for you to code it rather than to create a uh, hierarchical model or hierarchical arrangement of your drag and drop properties. You can do so in this uh, feature. Okay, this is all laid out in an intuitive fashion, which with different aspects of your game. So chaining together in the IDE to give you a unique and very visual representation of the workflow. So mainly in the game Maker Studio 2, we have already have here when you are planning to code or when you are planning to use your D&D. Um, you already have our IDE similar to other programming languages, no? Even if you are not scripting, even when you are using the D&D functionality, when you are uh, trying to use certain functions, uh, objects, methods, and then variables on each and every um, event, you can actually now call them or verify if it is existing. So mainly that is just one functionality of the IDE or the integrated development environment, which is what we are familiar of, no? Like when we are programming in C, Java, by just typing a few letters, for example, typing Ave, and then it will be providing you different functionalities that are already built in on the IDE. So that is one ease of way when it comes to developing and programming in GameMaker Studio 2. Next is GameMaker Studio 2 comes with a number of powerful tools like what we have mentioned before. The image editor when you want to create your own sprites, which is for example, you want to create a sprite for your players, enemies, power-ups, which will be used in the development of your game. Um, you can also use the tile sets if, like, let's say you are planning to create the background or building blocks of your background, stages, and levels for your game. Um, Aside from using the image editor and tile sets, you can just simply import images coming from external editors like Photoshop, Paint, GIMP, or any editors that you are using. Same as what we have done on GameMaker Studio 1. Another thing that is new in GMS2 is we can also use the SWF file or the SWIP files, which are vector animations or animations that are created using vector points or vector curves, no, from Flash. But though Flash is already obsolete, we can also use spine skeleton, which provides an effective way of um, animating sprites. So on the traditional way, kasi when we are like let's say when we are planning to create a walk cycle or walking animation, 'di ba? We will be creating multiple sprites like isang step ng paa, yung galaw ng kamay individually. So mainly, aside from creating sprites, we can use that certain spline animations. Okay, it can be imported directly to the GameMaker Studio 2 for the ease of animation of your sprites or your objects. Next is once you have your images, it is simply a question of assigning them to objects. Mainly when we are recalling the workflow of the GameMaker Studio process, we have the sprites, and then we have the objects, we have the events that are working as a whole for you to create functionalities, interactions from the users to your game. So mainly, it is just said on the PowerPoint presentations that once you have the images, assign them to an object, which can be edited now on the object editor. If we have sprite or image editor for editing images, we have object editors as well, where we can add sprites, set the center of origin, set the masks, set the certain functionalities, manage the variables, manage the events of an objects, and so on. So next is after creating an object, we can already add some code, which is probably if like let's say you want to code, you can use the GameMaker language, or you can just use the drag and drop functionality as we did on iGameC, or if like let's say you are planning to both do the mix uh, approach like we have discussed a while ago, you can just use the DND and use the code whenever it is convenient for you. Okay, so And then placing instances of these objects. When we are talking about instances, remember that we are just creating a copy or an instance of an object that is being created, because this is how game development is done, no? I believe from our previous discussion, and eto lang, isisingit ko lang, no? As I am currently paneling multiple students, multiple groups for capstone. This is one factor that is affecting the development cycle of all students under game development. No, they are not aware, or they are not pushing the use of instances. Okay, so like let's say for example, you are planning to create a game and you need 10 enemies. No, you won't be creating 10 sprites, 10 objects for you just to use them, and create them, no, or add them to your room in your game. You can just instantiate an object, create one object, a type of object, and then put it on the room. So basically, all of the properties, all of the functionalities of that particular object can be used, no, to our ano ba yun, for our game development. So ayun lang, please. For now, as you have your formal discussion or formal topics for game development, you have iGameC, you have mobile game development and game development. Please lang, if ito na, you will be ano ba yun? Upon the defense for the, I believe this, kasi nga mix ito eh, diba? We have fourth year and then we have third year students. For the third year students, please practice the use of instances, no? Kasi ang nangyayari is you don't need to create multiple, like let's say for example, if you want to create multiple um, people in a certain area that is just simply walking, you won't be creating each and individual one of those. Just create an object, create multiple stripes, an instance of that certain object, mapapadali ang buhay natin. No? Kapag sinabi mo you have 10 types of people that are working around as a target for your objectives, eh di yan dali. Papalit ka lang ng stripe. You will just be using an instance of the object that has been made. So basically, along with the discussion naman for the development of games, we will be imposing, or we will be emphasizing the functionality or the purpose of instances, no, para doon sa mga magta-third year naman dyan, wala nang rason kapag kayo na yung magta-thesis. Okay, so as an recap for the overview, so mainly napag-usapan natin what are sprites, objects, and rooms, and mainly as you can see, these three things provides you the harmony of creating your games in Game Maker Studio. So to simply speak, to simply introduce all of them again, we have sprites, which is composed of images or individual movements for your character, and animation if probably you have GIFs or GIFs, and yung spine animation natin, you can add it as a sprite for the as a texture for your objects in the game, which is then after creating your sprites, you will be creating game objects that can be instantiated to your rooms, which is as you can see on the screen dito sa baba. Okay, so these objects holds the logic or the events or interaction inside the game. Like let's say if these two objects collide, if this object has been shot by a bullet or whatsoever, so those are all of the things that are happening that has logic and interaction inside your game. And all of these objects has their own sprites. Like let's say for example, I have a enemy object. I can put different sprites or different images as a texture or a skin para dun sa object na yon. And then I can just go to the rooms and add those individual objects dun sa dun sa game. So you need a room for your game to have yung tinatawag natin na levels, stages, screens, or kung ano man yung gusto yung itawag sa kanila, for you to have a area for the game to happen. So mainly these are the three things that are interacting with one another when it comes to developing games. No, this is just an overview, a recap for those who already know this, and along with the students who are currently taking up the game development course. In Game Maker Studio 2, there are also additional tools which are used for creating paths, sequences, and shaders, though, in the development process, and a whole lot more. So we will be discussing some of them, but I believe we can't cover them all. No, so we will just be discussing what is important and what we need for us to create at least a full working game. And basically, as what you can see on the PowerPoint presentation, you'll find the IDE or the integrated development environment of the game engine, which is Game Maker Studio 2, to be also incredibly flexible, and it can be customized to your needs simply when it comes to um, displaying or how your interface works. Like let's say for example, pwede mong i-adjust parang Photoshop, you can put the palette, you can manipulate different windows on your screen, you can change even the background of the Game Maker Studio 2 template, or basically you are just setting up the development environment software. You can edit it as well. Okay, so you can actually do this by using the different preferences that are available on the Game Maker Studio 2. Continuing, while Game Maker Studio 2 is a powerful tool, it cannot do everything that you want in a single flip a button, flip of a switch, or a single touch of a button doon sa mismo software. I do know, or I do remember that we have been explaining as your instructors that when you are creating games using Game Maker, it provides you the easy way, like the drag and drop functionalities and easily understandable Game Maker language. But we should not oversimplify it. No, it cannot do everything for you at the touch of the button. So start small with simple examples which will be discussed along the way, or you can go to the website of the Game Maker Studio that is provided on the PowerPoint and in this video presentation, which is https eurogames.com. Okay, so continuing. When you first open Game Maker Studio 2, you will be asked to log in your Yo-Yo account. So probably will be planning to create your account there first, or based on my experiences, I just log in using my email account. Okay, once you have already registered and logged in, the main Game Maker Studio IDE will open on the start page, and it will provide you the or it will ask you the question of updating the current set of software if you want to or not. If like let's say you don't want the to update the software and start right away when it comes to developing using the software itself. Next, simply we talk about the workspace, where in the first menu option that is provided by the Game Maker Studio 2 is the file menu. So here are the different options that are available in the file menu, like creating a new project, opening a project, which are actually self-explanatory, no? But for the sake of discussing our module and our ano ba yun, topic for today, which is familiarizing the Game Maker Studio, we'll be checking out and discussing each and every one of these. Okay. The first one is the new project. So, ano ba yun? In layman's term, if you want to create your new project from scratch, if like let's say you don't have a previous file to open, you can just create your new project after and then save it afterwards. So mainly when you are creating a new project in Game Maker Studio 2, the file extension that is being made for creating that project is the .yyp file extension. The next option under the file menu is the open project. Another simply self-explanatory. If like let's say you have already saved your previous project before, or like let's say you want to open other projects that you have downloaded, you can simply find and locate file extensions under YYZ, which is the file extension of the Game Maker project. Open it and then load it on the IDE or the on the Game Maker Studio engine. The next is recent projects. If after you have already saved a project, and for example, instead of opening, the difference from opening it is you can see this on the menu where previously created project or recently created projects will be given as an option to be opened, instead of, like, let's say for example, you have multiple projects and you are planning to open an old project from before or a new project that is downloaded online. You can use the recent project options if you have just recently closed this project before. Then we have the save project, which is another self-explanatory one. Like if you are planning to save your file as the YYP uh, project file that you want to open later on as an file or a recent file, you can save your project this way. Saving saving a project asks allow you to save a copy of your project. Like for example, if you just don't want to simply save, or you want to save a version or an iteration of project, you can save your project as. Next is you can export a project. Okay, this will export the project as a YYZ file, and it is very useful if, like, let's say you want to send a copy online uh, to other people, like let's say your members. Along the way, you can export your project as well. The next thing is the preferences, where you can select and take you to the preferences window where you can set up how Game Maker Studio looks and feel, which is what we have discussed previously. Like um if you want to edit or at least personalize how the environment or the game engine environment looks and feels for you, you can go to the preferences window. Okay, so aside from that, you can also set up how the in-game timer works, or the tick timer works in the game, in the actual game engine, where in when you run and develop a game. For example, if you want to create a game that is running on 60 frames, 120 frames per second, you can also set that on the preferences options. Next is the under the file menu again. Continuing is the new IDE, wherein if, like, let's say you are planning to run multiple instances of the Game Maker Studio. For example, you want to open a project, like for example you want to open this project and another project for you to compare the two projects at the same time. You can open a new IDE or use this menu under the file menu, which is the new IDE, for you to open another instance of the Game Maker Studio file. The next one is we have my account, wherein as you have already done initially, you will be creating an account for under Yo-Yo Games before buying, installing, and then setting it up on your computer. So by doing this, it will redirect you using a browser, or on your default browser, the currently logged on account that you have on the Game Maker Studio 2. This is mainly for the purposes if, like, let's say you want to check the status of your account for any renewals, any updates, any changes. Okay, and even bug reports are also there. uh, Basically everything that is under account or under your Yo-Yo account on the Game Maker uh, engine company. Next is if, like, let's say for example, you want to log out on the currently logged on account. Syempre, no, that is a no-brainer. Why would you do that? Okay, for example, you want to log in a certain account that has no restrictions, like let's say for example a premium account. You have already bought a premium account, you can out of the previously logged on account. Or like let's say for example, if you are using both, you can log or switch between accounts by logging out using this function. And lastly, under the file menu, we have the exit. So I believe hindi naman tayo kailangan mag-explain what an exit does. So basically, if, like, let's say you click exit, it will end the IDE, or it will close the application itself, which is the Game Maker Studio. Next, After the file menu, we have now the edit menu. So basically, as you can see, what does edit menu simply does is, if like let's say you want to undo and redo certain actions, which is very very common when it comes to development softwares, like for example, you have created a certain functionality, you have deleted a certain object, you have typed or cleared a certain script or what, you can actually use this edit functionality under the edit menu of GameMaker Studio. And aside from that, we also have this, what we call the last one, which is the search and replace functionality under the edit menu, where this is can be useful, as you can use this to search through all the scripted assets in your game. Kailan ito nagagamit, kailan ito nagiging usable or convenient. It is, you can actually look at this as similar to the functionality under Microsoft Word, for example. Like currently, if you are creating a huge amount of document, and then for example you are mentioning a certain words multiple times, for example sa inyong mga nagtitesis, no, sinasabi nyo you are calling yourself as the researchers, but along the way you have decided to call yourself the proponents, the developers, the students, or what. Instead of uh, going through the whole document by changing each and individual word, kagaya sa Microsoft Word, you can just find and replace a certain text if we are talking about simply the scripting part of the game maker. Okay, so how is that useful? Like let's say for example, if you have multiple instances of that variable, multiple instances of that function on your game maker studio files, game maker studio scripts, so you can just simply update it or find it by just using the edit menu under the file or edit menu options. And this is how it looks like, no, when you have selected the search and replace function under the edit menu, you will see this window. So we have search, replace. If like let's say you will just be typing on the box what are the specific words or what are the specific functions that you want to replace on the whole documents or on the whole scripting uh, files of your game, and then what you will replace it of doon sa baba na box. So along the edit mode pa rin, so you can choose now to make the search case sensitive. Like let's say for example, sabihin na natin na probably you have a instance of a word or a specific word that you want to change, but it would possibly affect other words that have the certain case issue. Like for example, you have a variable named myvardao, and if like let's say you won't be setting up as a case sensitive search, it would affect even the other variables that are using the myvar, even though they are of the different uh, pointer, no, doon sa memory ng inyong scripting language. And actually this is somewhat a basic concept when it comes to programming, no, mga third year and fourth year na kayo, so we do know that different cases are actually different pointers on the program, but mainly kapag kasi ginamit natin si edit menu and sinabi natin na hindi case sensitive, possible na mabago yung dalawang variables na yun. Okay? The next one is you can choose only to include search results that include the whole word only. Like let's say for example, if you are searching for a specific word, kasi anong nangyayari kasi when it comes to searches, for if like let's say you are not planning to replace and you want to search, if for example the word is contained in a longer word, no, like let's say for example um you created a variable na strawberry, you know, you can actually create another variable, or you are searching for the word na berry. If like let's say you created a ano ba yun? An instance of different types of berries, and then iba si strawberry, iba si berry, iba yung straw na word. So, ginamit mo lahat yun doon sa iyong document, and it would be providing you this different index of searches wherein you can just simply specify kung ano ba yung specific objects na yon para hindi ka na magkaroon ng problem when it comes to having multiple search results. The next one is you can choose to have search ignore certain comments kasi probably dahil nga we are scripting, no, sabihin na natin na naglagay ka lang ng annotation, naglagay ka lang ng comment that is about the certain variable that is incidentally what you are searching for. Like let's say for example, you are searching for the word na berry pero meron kang comment na please refer to the variable berry na comment. Ang mangyari is it will also be included along with your searches. Kaya for you to filter it out, you can also ignore certain comments by clicking the option doon sa mismong search and replace menu natin. Then, continuing to the edit menu, no, you can apply a filter. So, ayan lahat sila on each search results based on the different asset types in the asset browser. So, basically, if like, let's say, because it will be searching on all of the scripting or on all of the assets that are available or resources that are available to the game maker file, if like let's say we can specify which part of the game maker project, like kung alam mo na nasa script yun, kung alam mo na nasa object yun or nasa notes yun, which are shown on the PowerPoint presentation, you can already specify it there para at least mabilis na yung searches mo and then hindi nalilitaw yung mga unnecessary searches as well. Continuing, once you have given a search term and set up the search options, you can use the different buttons at the bottom to choose how to perform the search actions. Like for example, ito daw yung mga different ways on how to search for it. You can first find all. So find all the search terms and show them in the output window. You can find previous instance of the search term. Okay, this will open the assets containing the reference of the workspace. If like let's say if it is not opened, you can find next. It is just quite similar, no, doon sa MS Word natin when you are finding. Parang if like let's say if you search for a content, you can scroll in between the searches next and then previously doon. No? Then afterwards upon searching, if like let's say you want to replace something, you can replace everything. No, this will perform a search for a given term to replace everything that has the certain filters that you have set, or you can actually simply replace the currently selected term doon sa mga options that are available. And if along the way you are still searching doon sa mismong search edit menu mo and it is already taking time, you can actually just stop the search. If simply nakita na yon doon sa mga unang instances ng search na pinaprovide sa'yo nung ating search and replace functionality. Next is we have the build menu. So ito naman yung mga nakikita natin under sa build menu. Similar on different IDEs as well and similar on the other functionalities under the build doon sa Game Maker Studio natin, which please do remember you can do this by clicking doon sa build menu and then doon sa taas you can do this by pressing the keyboard shortcuts as well, like F5, F6, Control 7, and F8. Or you can just simply click yung mga icons that are available doon sa mismong IDE natin. Other way, they are just the same functionalities, different ways on how to access those functionalities doon sa Game Maker Studio natin. Okay? So the build menu is where you can choose to build your project either for testing, debugging, or as a final executable. If yung mga functions na yon, ang intention natin for after creating our game or opening a previous project, ito yung pupuntahan natin na menu. So basically, the first build menu is yung tinatawag natin na run. So simply speaking, if after you have created your objects, sprites, and then your rooms, you are set up, you want to test your game, simply ito na siya. You want to run your project. Run your current project on the chosen target platform for testing. This command is the same as pressing the run button on the IDE, which was mentioned a while ago. Next is we have yung tinatawag natin na debug. Okay, so you can run your current project for testing with the debugger so you can see the detailed performance information, yung mga file directories, yung mga problems. If like let's say there are certain problems on the project, it will all be seen while debugging the whole project. And I believe this is not the first time that you have heard what a debug is and learn what a debug does. So basically, you can build your project, debug it, check where are those resources, check where are those problems are occurring using this build menu. Next is to under the build menu again, we have the clean option. So kailan ba natin ginagawa tong clean option na to? So mainly we are building clean a project. So what happens kasi is when you are creating a project in GameMaker, parang web page din yan, no? It creates or it uses cookies, for example, that yung mga cached files natin for it to simply load faster. Ganon din ang nangyayari kasi when it comes to game development, meron rin tayong cache files that are available when you are creating a game. And if like let's say you have changed the game, you have changed majority or simply speaking maraming bagay doon sa mismong project file natin under sa game project file natin, ang mangyayari it is advisable for you to do a clean build kasi ang nangyayari it could possibly still be loading yung mga resources before na natanggal mo na. Kaya ang nangyayari minsan is alam mo na tama naman ang ginawa mo pero it is not showing anything. And minsan, after you do hindi ka nag-clean build, you run the project, wala naman errors that are happening, you can do a clean build for you to update the resources, to update the cache file, to update the certain files, para kapag mag-run yung project, alam niya na, okay, i-update ko lahat yung mga current resources, update ko lahat yung mga current mga scripts natin into something na new executable or new na i-run ng mismong GameMaker Studio. Next, under sa build menu is, for example, you want to create an executable file. So, mainly, if sabihin na natin na natapos mo nang gawin yung game mo for the intended platform by default, which is the Windows operating system, no? Or yung inyong desktop PC, pwede kang mag-compile ngayon ng isang executable file for you to install it. Executable or installer na pwede mong i-distribute afterwards. So, ayan, based on the definition, this will compile the current project and create an executable package or a compressed file if kung yun ang gusto mo i-select dun sa preferences niya for the target platform na balak mong gawin. If like let's say you want to create for a Windows file, it is a .exe. If you want to target an Android operating system, it is the what is the file extension? It is the .apk. Then another part of the build menu is meron tayong tinatawag na show remote worker installer. So basically, we won't be using this along the way, no? Pero when we're talking about remote workers sa game maker, eto lang. I believe if like let's say you are my students under MMS, ganito yung nangyayari. We know what rendering does, and simply speaking when you are building a game project as well, when compiling it, simply it takes a lot of time and takes a lot of process. Imagine if like let's say you are planning to build a very very huge game and simply it would take time to build, to compress, to execute yung mismong project natin. You can simply go to this remote workers na to na kung saan you can assign multiple computers to distribute the workload. So, ang nangyayari, ito yung concept na nabanggit ko sa multimedia noon, dun sa mga naging estudyante ko dyan, na for example, alam naman natin, if you want to create a video file, you will render afterwards na mag-edit ka, nag-set ka ng transition and all. Okay? Kapag mag-render ka, if it says 10 days dun sa computer mo, because it is mabagal, magantay ka ng 10 days when it comes to rendering it. Pero you can use this functionality, you can set this up. If like let's say you have multiple workstations available, pwede nilang paghati-hatian yung trabaho na instead of maging 10 days, tig to 2 days na lang sila. If ganun talaga siya kalaki, no, yung inyong mismong game project. So basically, we won't be needing this as we won't be creating humongous games, or you won't be planning to create games na ganun kalalaki. So, ayun lang. Okay, the next menu, we have the tools, which ito yung mga nakikita natin ngayon currently dun sa under sa tools menu. We have texture groups, audio groups, mixers, project images, local package, import local package. So basically, if like let's say ito yung mga binabanggit natin na different tools that we want, that we have in Game Maker Studio, like let's say for example, if you want to edit and manipulate textures, simply ito yung mga sprites natin, or yung mga images na ginagamit in game. For example, you can do this here sa audio groups. Sa audio groups naman and sound mixer, basically you can edit and manipulate yung mga audio files natin doon sa mismong Game Maker Studio game engine natin, and i-check natin sila. Next, under dun sa tools menu is we have yung generate project images. Like let's say for example, ano ba yung mga certain project images that are included aside from the sprites na meron tayo dun sa mismong game. Meron tayong for example, balak mo na i-publish yung inyong game, you can generate these images like yung splash screen, yung icons na gagamitin, or different resolution of icons along the way for publishing and distribution of your game. Dito yun sa general project images. Create local package. Ayan siya, ang nangyayari is it opens the asset package window, and it will give you the functionality to package your software, or afterwards import it, which is yung option number C natin under sa tools menu, for you to open it if like let's say there are certain things that you want to manipulate, edit, or use inside a certain package of the game. Okay. So mainly no, ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng mga packages na to, like creating a package, importing a package, how it is being used, kailan ba siya nagiging kapaki-pakinabang, no? Think of this. For example, you are planning to create a game, alam naman natin what is a sprite, meron akong mga images, meron akong mga certain objects. Tapos, yung mga yun usually, di ba? For example, meron akong character, may images and sprites ako, usually nakasave yan sa Windows. Okay, dun sa folder, sa drive D, sa pictures, kung saan man sa flash drive mo, and so on. So, ang nangyayari is, paano kapag like, let's say, nabura yung folder na yon, 'di ba? Tapos, inopen mo ngayon yung project mo. Anong mangyayari? Ang mangyayari is magkakaroon ka ng mga unlinked files. Kasi ang nangyayari, si Game Maker Studio, hindi siya automatically upon loading, for example, you created an image as a sprite, hindi siya automatically nag-create ng local na copy nung file na yon. Ang mangyayari is, for example, if you want to copy the whole project or the folder lang na hindi mo na kailangan isama at i-locate lahat ng mga resources na ginamit mo, you can just simply create a package of it. Ngayon, if like let's say you want to open it, ano ba yung mga instances na meron tayong ganun? If like let's say you want to edit the package, meron kang gustong palitan doon, meron kang gustong extract na certain image or media sa loob ng package na yon, ito yung option natin under sa tools menu. Next na menu na natin na meron tayo ngayon is the marketplace menu. And simply kapag sinabi natin marketplace, I believe this is quite familiar for us, most of the people na meron mga mobile devices, no? We already have the marketplace na kung saan nandoon yung mga probably games and then the assets that are available online that you want to purchase, you want to submit online for you to sell if possible. Okay? So dito, if like let's say meron kang account sa Yoyo Games, you can open the marketplace for you to buy assets if you want to. So ano ba lahat yan? Tingnan natin lahat. Ayun. So sinasabi natin una, ayan siya, go to the marketplace is to open the marketplace window. So if like for example we want to look at different assets available, like let's say for example images, objects, or any functions that are available doon sa mismong marketplace, we can buy them, download them, or use them to integrate to our project files. It has the library where kung like let's say you are selling or promoting your assets dun sa marketplace, you can manage your available assets na kung saan yung mga binili mo or yung mga meron ka na doon sa mismong library mo, they are all posted there. purchase history, like let's say certain transactions that happened doon sa mismong Yoyo page game or doon sa marketplace page, na kung saan it would give you a detailed information of who provided this assets, what did it cost, and so on and so on. So yun lang yung makikita natin along with the purchase history. Here we can also have the functionality or the capability to update an existing package. Okay, so ano ba yun? This option will allow you to update the package that you have created, and you can also create your own package, ayan, or a tutorial para maipost mo yun sa marketplace to be accessed by everyone in the community. So, ayun, update package if like let's say there are certain changes dun sa isang package na meron ka dun sa iyong library. The next menu na meron tayo is yung layouts menu. So, meron tayong load layout, save layout, and reset layout. So, ano ba lahat ng mga yan? Okay, as what is shown dun sa ating PowerPoint presentation, this is related to saving and loading daw yung different layouts natin ng IDE. As nabanggit natin kanina that you can customize and change the layout of your IDE, ito yung mangyayari dyan doon sa mismong game application natin. And you can save it in the file extension na meron tayo, which is yung .xml file na scripting language. Next is, ito yung mga different layouts na meron tayo, or this layout menus na meron tayo. You can load it if like let's say meron kang nakasave. So kagaya ng pinabanggit natin kanina. Yung pangalawa is we have the save layout. So if after mo nag-save, meron ka ng current layout that is modified by you on your preference for your productivity, you can load it as well, and you can reset it to the default layout kung like let's say accidentally nakapag-load ka lang ng layout na meron ka. So now, nandito na tayo, sprite resources. So when we are talking about sprite resources, no, in general daw, what is a sprite? Ito yung kasing pinakaunang-unang i-discuss natin when it comes to resources niyan. Well, in general, a sprite will be associated with an object, okay, which is nabanggit na natin kanina na kung saan meron kang image at gagamitin yun ng object na to. Okay? So you can draw sprites on their own. So mainly, you can use the image editor, or you can use the room editor. And aside from the image editor, meron rin tayong tile sets na pwede rin natin gamitin for us to modify or manipulate yung mga images na meron tayo. So when you create a new project from the start page, meron tayong resource tree, which is makikita natin dun sa right side, which is the same thing as the Game Maker Studio 1 na nandoon yung assets natin like sprites, objects, resources, rooms, and so on. So, ang mangyayari lang is doon sa folder ng sprites is you would be right-clicking it and then selecting the create options for you to create a sprite resource. So, ayan. Ito yung kalalabasan or ito ngayon yung makikita mo when it comes to creating a new sprite. In this case, ito na yung meron na tayong loaded na sprites. Kung nakikita ninyo doon sa taas, meron tayong different sets of images. Nandito ngayon sa gitna, which is dun sa ating preview pane natin, yung pinakakalalabasan ng kada individual frames na meron tayo sa isang sprite. Okay? So, kung makikita ninyo, yung ating sprite has different animation, movements, kaya nga marami sila dun sa taas. Ang nangyayari is, yung ating character has two swords that is slightly moving them along with the tornado na nandun sa kanyang mga paa. So basically, this is an animation na kapag pinlay mo, sunod-sunod yung mga images na yan, it creates the illusion of motion, which has been discussed naman sa multimedia natin. So basically, if like let's say you want to load your images that are used sa mismo game maker natin, nagagamitin later on ng mga objects natin at ilalagay sa room. So, ito yung window na titignan at pakikialaman natin. Okay? So, doon daw sa top left ng window is meron tayo doon tinatawag na name. So, basically, this is the name of the sprite. Okay? So, parang isipin na lang natin na ano ba, ang mainly ipapangalan natin doon sa sprite image na yon, which can be accessed later on. And paano lang hindi mahaba dun sa buong PowerPoint presentation, usually meron tayong naming convention when it comes to naming yung sprites natin. You can actually name it kagaya ng variable na pag name nyo ng A, B, C, D, E, and all. Pero if like let's say you plan to create a ball daw, for example, you need to name it in this format gaya na nakikita ninyo doon sa ating PowerPoint na meron daw extension doon sa umpisa, which is meron tayong prefix na SPR. So at least we know that SPR underscore ball is a sprite asset. Okay, this can be useful along the way kapag like let's say gagamitin mo na yung edit menu mo, which is magsa-search ka, you will just be searching ball. Hindi mo alam kung object ba yon, sprite ba yon, event ba yon, animation ba yon, or what. So basically using this prefix and suffix doon sa mga created na mga text natin doon sa mismong project file natin is mapapadali yung buhay natin when it comes to managing them later on. Okay? So, drawing the sprite is done on the image editor, which is yung nakikita ninyo dito. So, basically, the image editor is just a tool or a software or part of the game engine that is used to create the graphics in your game. You can simply do pixel art there. You can actually do it similar as parang meron kang image editor like Paint, Photoshop. Pero, syempre, limited lang yung functionality niya. So, meron tayo dyan color palettes, different tools that are available there na pwede ninyong pakialaman. So, hindi na natin kailangan i-discuss them individually because some of it is basically self-explanatory that it is an image editor for you to create yung sprites natin. And, ayan siya in close-up. So, makikita nyo doon sa taas, like you can select which individual frames ng animation ng sprite ang gusto nyong palitan, i-edit, or pakialaman. Doon sa right side is meron tayong certain color palettes or swatches, even the brushes na nandun sa upper right side as well. Doon sa right part ng ating screen, makikita natin yung mga different tools na pwede natin gamitin to manipulate yung image natin. So, gaya na nabanggit natin kanina, yung top left daw ng ating screen is the frame view. Okay, this allows the frames of your sprite and can be resized using the magnifying glass icons, which is yung mga icons na nakita natin previously. In the center, we have the drawing canvas, which shows the currently selected frame ready for drawing, which is yung nabanggit natin kanina. Ang dami-daming sprites that are available on the top part. So, what happens is you select one of those and then yun yung mapipreview doon sa baba. That is the drawing canvas. Then, at the right, we have the basic brushes, which is yung nakikita ninyo, yung mga tayo iba't ibang shapes ng mga brushes there. Here you can pick the brush for drawing, and any custom brushes will also be added dito. Okay, so like let's say if you want to add a custom brush that you want, pwede natin ilagay dyan. To the middle right, we have the color picker, palettes or swatches if you want to. So self-explanatory kung ano yon. And just below the color picker, we have our tools that have different drawing tools, including the brush, flat fill, masking, and other tools that you can actually see on different image editing softwares or programs, aside from this image editor na meron tayo ngayon sa GameMaker Studio. Then, proceeding sa discussion natin doon sa mga sprites, the first thing you need to know is how to set the origin of the sprite, which is meron tayong iba't ibang klase ng mga origin dito like top, left, center, right. So mainly kasi ang basihan ng origin na to is how does your sprite will behave while being used by the objects in game. So ang nangyayari kasi along the way kapag like let's say meron na tayong certain event, kapag like let's say kailangan mag-instantiate ng object mo na meron siyang image, which is yung sprite na gagamitin mo, kailangan aware ang mismong game engine kung nasaan yung kanyang tinatawag na anchor point. Okay? So, ang mangyayari kasi is, for example, kailangan i-rotate yung object na yon is doon nakadepende yun, doon sa anchor point niya. Okay? So, kung saan mo sinet ang anchor point, yun ang mismong point of place na kung saan yung mismong object mo or yung mismong sprite mo is magkakaroon ng rotation na function. Okay? So, iba't iba ang, ano ba yon? Kada isang sprite or iba't ibang sprites have different anchor points based on their purpose or their use. Pero most of the time, by default, lahat ng mga sprites natin, specifically yung game na gagawin natin the next week, is gagamit lang tayo simply ng mga anchor points that are set into its center. So, upon setting up yung ating anchor point doon sa ating image, makakita kayo doon ng crosshair na kung saan yun yung magiging basihan na kung saan naka-indicate or nakaset yung mismong uh, center ng mass or yung pinaka-anchor point ng image natin. And parang Cartesian plane, we have the positive and negative y and x axis na kung saan aside, kumpara mo sa Cartesian plane, kakaiba lang sa game maker kasi yung y-axis natin is inverted. So, kung negative sa Cartesian plane ang baba, positive sa taas, baliktad siya, negative sa taas, positive sa baba. At yung x-axis is just the same, negative dun sa left side and then positive doon sa right side ng Cartesian plane. Then, another important thing to do know is how to set the collision mask for the sprite. Kasi itong mga collision mask na to, basically, ito yung nagde-determine kung kapag like let's say, nag-run na yung ating game, ginamit na siya ng object natin, ito ang magti-trigger ng event na tinatawag natin collision that is most commonly used when it comes to simple games like, for example, yung mga 2D games. Ang nangyayari kasi is, for example, usually meron tayong collision detection na algorithm na kung saan, for example, bumaril ka, magka-instantiate yung game mo ng bala at yung bala na yun is tatama sa enemy and the enemy will be destroyed kapag nagkaroon ng collision yung image ng iyong enemy at yung image ng iyong bullet. Ngayon, paano iyon ika-calculate ng mismong game engine? It depends on the collision masks that is available doon sa mismong sprite na ginamit mo. So, it can be either a rounded, elliptical, precise, all of those things will be presented along the way kapag actual na tayo magkikreate ng game. So basically, yun lang yung purpose ng mask. Additionally, sinasabi dito na any type of collision masks other than rectangle, okay, which is kasama na dito yung spherical, elliptical, and so on and so on, lahat ng yun, ayun, will result to a slower functionality or slower processing of the game. Kasi ang nangyayari, the more na nagiging detailed or the more na nagiging precise yung mask ng isang object based doon sa boundary nung kanyang parts na kung saan magte-trigger yung collision detection, the more na dadami yung process na kailangan ng game mo when it comes to determining yung kung kailan magkakaroon ng collision kapag tatama yung mga parts na yun sa kanya. Unlike kapag square, alam ng game mo na okay, within this boundary, 4 corners, 4 sides, is kapag may tumama doon sa location na yun, automatically, magta-trigger na yung collision. Pero if there are specific, like let's say may mga buhok-buhok pa and so on, that is a different story and kada isang linya or polygon na makikreate mo would cause a processing power sa iyong game. Next, pag-usapan naman natin what are objects. Objects are special resources that we use to control the aspects of a game and do specific things. So most of the time, they have the sprite associated with them so that you can see them in game rooms. Kagaya ng sinasabi natin kanina, these objects, which is sinasabi ko, special resource, control the aspects of the game, kasi sila yung mag-handle ng mga events natin. Sila yung magti-trigger ng mga sensors, ng mga algorithms, like for example, collision detection in-game, si objects yung bahala doon. Kapag nagbanggaan yung dalawang object, what will happen? Kapag nangyari ito sa object, what will happen? Kapag nabaril yung object, what will happen? So, lahat ng yun, it will happen to the object and the sprites are just the skin, pabalat, texture ng mga yun. Okay? But sometimes they are used as a behind the scenes kasi merong mga instances na merong mga objects na hindi mo kailangan lagyan ng sprite. Kasi mainly, nilalagyan natin ng sprite ang isang object. For example, enemy object, lalagyan mo ng enemy sprite, which is yung image ng enemy mo. para pakita natin siya doon sa mismong game area natin or doon sa room ng ating area. Pero at times, for example, gagamitin mo lang siya for mathematical equation, gagamitin mo lang siya as a timer na hindi mo naman kailangan ipakita, or in-game timer na hindi mo naman kailangan ipakita, or tagahawak ng mga variables, ng mga scores, or mga internal na mga values dun sa mismong game that are running on background na hindi mo naman kailangan ipakita, pwede mong huwag na lang lagyan ng sprites. So it means that all objects are not necessarily needing sprites, no? Pero all sprites are supposedly expected to be used by objects later on doon sa mismong game natin. And syempre, kagaya nung ginawa natin doon sa ating sprite resource, pupunta ka lang doon sa resources part ng ating window or ng ating IDE, and then gagawin mo lang is doon sa folder ng object resource, right click ka lang doon and kiklik mo lang yung create. Okay? So, doon sa object resources natin, after mo mag-create, it will provide you this object editor na kung saan if you create an object, eto lahat yung mga things na pwede mong i-provide sa kanya. Kagaya ng pinag-uusapan natin kanina, the objects are special resource that can handle these things. This is the object editor window daw based on what you can see doon sa mismong screen natin ngayon. And the first thing you should do is name the object, which is meron tayo again naming convention na instead of doon sa sprites kanina meron tayo SPR. In objects, we have the naming convention of a prefix na sineset natin as obj. Okay? In general, for an object to draw anything, kagaya na nabanggit natin kanina, para lumitaw siya sa ating room or doon sa ating game, kailangan meron siyang naka-assign na sprite sa kanya. Okay? And along the way, kapag gagana na yung or gagamitin na yung mga objects na to doon sa ating mismong game, para magkaroon tayo ng certain registry ng mga events like collisions, kailangan natin mag-set ng mga factors that are also shown doon sa mismo ating object editor window. Okay? One of these things na sineset up natin sa kanya is like, let's say for example, you want to load a sprite, it will open up a new window na kung saan yung mga sprite or yung directory mo on your windows will be located. And then, pwede mo nang i-load yun doon sa mismo object mo. Ayan. For simple games, you probably don't need to change anything doon sa mga objects, as basically, ang nangyayari lang naman dito is magsiset lang naman tayo ng mga simple and basic collisions. Pero, later on, kapag like, let's say, your game demands specifics for the object's functionality, kailangan mong i-modify yun doon. And we will be looking at those on the following weeks. So basically, events are discrete movements in the game loop where things are made to happen based on what you program to them. So, ang nangyayari kasi, you are applying this tinatawag natin na mga events. No? Kasi ang pinag-uusapan na natin on this slide is events. So, for example, ano ba yung mga different events na to? There are certain events na based on different input devices na meron tayo sa mismong game natin or dun sa mismong computer natin or device na tatargetin natin. When it comes to desktop computers, may inputs tayo galing sa mouse and keyboard. We can also input for consoles or kung like let's say sa computer pa rin, we can input joypads, joysticks, yung mga controllers natin. Those can be also considered to be input devices that can be set as an event. For example, left click, right click, ipipress mo yung arrow key na up, down, left, right. Those are all considered to be events. Okay? Events na meron doon sa mismong natin. Mismong game na inaabangan niyang mangyari. Sa programming, usually, ito yung mga tinatawag natin na mga listeners. And ito, yung mga examples ng mga events natin, meron tayo. Create, upon creation of the objects, yun yung event natin kapag nag-start, na-destroy, nag-clean up, meron tayong step event na always running, alarms, draw. Basically, lahat ng mga yan are certain events na inaantay, like kagaya ng mouse or yung key down for the keyboard. Ano yung mga basically parang kumbaga sa ibang game engine, ito yung mga tinatawag natin na mga triggers, yung mga events. The first event na meron tayo is yung tinatawag natin na create event. These events happen when an instance of the object is first created or pagkaroon ng game mo na-create yung object na yun, nagpakita siya doon sa mismong room natin. So, basically, yun yung tinatawag natin na start ng event na yun. Basically, ginagamit natin to kapag magsiset tayo ng mga variables or mga certain values that are usually running in background like monitoring ng scores, HP, and so on. Basically, simple variables or values sa mismong game natin. Aside from the create event, meron tayong tinatawag na step event, and usually it is a loop that runs constantly on all events and it is constantly being checked. Ang nangyayari is on different game engines, ito yung tinatawag nilang always na event or always na listener, na like let's say for example, every time for example na merong mangyayari, it listens for what happens. Like usually ginagamit natin si step event if always gusto nating bumabaril yung enemy, always na nagro-rotate yung isang object, always it is checking for the scores na wala na siyang inaantay na kahit na anumang triggers or conditions or any factors. So mainly, a step event is a continuously running loop of an event that is waiting to be executing something. Next is we have yung tinatawag natin na collision event. Kagaya ng binabanggit at napag-uusapan natin kanina, collision event happens when two different objects na merong certain masks collides with one another or magdidikit sila. Pwedeng sabihin na natin na hindi man kagaya ng example na lagi na kapag bala at enemy, bala or character mamamatay, pwedeng power up siya. Na for example, yung character mo, nagdikit siya at nagkaroon ng collision doon sa power ups. For example, Super Mario may mushroom. Anong mangyayari? Lalaki siya or flower, magkakaroon siya ng firepower. What will happen next? Next is meron tayong tinatawag na draw events. And these draw events are usually used for us to create or show yung mga different variables natin. Like for example, you want to draw text, draw an animation, or draw a certain sprite doon sa screen. Pero usually, mainly ginagamit natin tong draw na to kasama ni step event because it is constantly changing. For example, scores, HP bars, yung mga yon na in background na gusto mo naman ipakita ngayon, you can use the draw event. Lastly, yung ating destroy event. So mainly, the destroy event is the last event usually na pinagdadaanan ng life cycle ng isang object sa mismong game. Ito yung usual na nangyayaring event kapag for example, nabaril yung character, what will happen? It could probably trigger the game over scene. Kung nabaril yung enemy, it would probably trigger the completion of the scene or completion of the certain enemy, or kung like let's say napatay mo yung isang enemy, isang object, or nabaril siya, nagkaroon ng collision or whatsoever that is being triggered, magkakaroon ka ng score. Kapag nagkaroon ka na ng events, like let's say for example, naayos mo na yung properties ng objects mo, nakapag-select ka na what specific events ang mangyayari, which is nakikita nyo ngayon dun sa gitna, meron tayo ngayon doon sa right side. Ito yung ano ba yun? Adding an event, sabi nga dito, will open either the code editor or the drag and drop editor, na kung saan meron tayo ngayong usually tinatawag natin na actuator or kung ano yung mangyayari. Basically, dun sa pinaka-left side, kung titignan natin yung screen, anong object ito, kung pinag-uusapan natin, sa gitna, anong event ang inaantay ni object? Is it a click? Is it a constant na create? Is it a step? Is it a collision? Tapos, kapag nangyari yung event na yon, which is nandun sa gitna ng tatlong to, for example, naklik yung button na ina-expect natin maklik, ang mangyayari is yung nandoon sa right side natin. Okay? So, it can be either dito natin ilalagay yung ating codes. We can put codes here, like GML programming language. Or we can actually add as well DND na mga blocks that we can use kung ano ang gusto nating mangyari or kung ano ang gusto nating outcomes kapag nag-trigger yon. Okay? If like let's say for example, nagkaroon ng press ng event na up arrow key, gusto mo maglagad yung character mo, kailangan mo i-code yun using GML dun sa right side or maghanap ka ng corresponding drag and drop na option or drag and drop na functionality doon sa DND natin na mga ano ba yun, D&D natin na mga blocks doon sa right side. That you make in Game Maker Studio 2 need at least one room to run. So basically, pinag-uusapan natin dito is room. Most of the time, ito yung tinatawag nilang stage, ito yung tinatawag nilang level, ito yung tinatawag nilang parang scene. Okay, pero in Game Maker, we call them a room. Room is just a space where you place instances, where you place objects, where you place these certain objects na nagkakaroon ng collision, nagko-call ng mga variables, nag-hold ng variables, nag-set ng mga events dun sa mismong dun sa mismong game engine. So basically, kung walang room, walang lugar kung saan ka maglalagay ng mga objects at hindi ito makikita ng iyong user or player. So basically, the room is the playground of all of the objects that have been coded. Kapag linagay mo sila doon, on how you are coded, how you have coded them, how you have set them, lahat sila ay mag-act inside the room based on the things that you want to make them do. Based from the events and based from the actions na gusto mong ipagawa sa kanila. Lahat ng yun will happen inside a room. Basically, this is the example or this is the layout for our game maker room, no? So kung makikita nyo, it is also comprised of different parts or different areas. Like let's say meron tayong layouts for this. Sa gitna meron tayong makikitang grid. So basically yan lang ang makikita mo doon sa room. Okay? Tapos makikita mo doon sa right side under sa resources na meron tayong different rooms that are available. Like let's say for example, merong start, merong intro 2, merong game 1, game 2, okay, merong arena, treasure. So basically, all of the different scenes sa iyong game may sarili siyang room. Kung may multiplayer, single player, for those type of games, usually linalagay sila sa magkakaibang room. Makikita natin yung mga properties dyan, like let's say yung resolution ng ating room, meron tayong layers, meron tayong mga bagay-bagay dyan nakikita which will be discussed next. Here, sinasabi na by default, the room tools will be placed on the left with 3 main sections. And the first section is yung tinatawag natin na layer editor. And sa layer editor, which is everything in a room daw, is placed on layers. So parang ang dating is, for example, sa Photoshop or any image editing software or even in video editing software, meron tayong mga layers. Meron kasing mga certain layers na dapat on top of one another. Okay? For example, you want to create a you want to create a background, tapos may character ka. Alam ka naman yung character mo, mas nakaharap pa yung background. So hindi mo na nakikitang gumagalaw yung main character mo. So you will be putting the player or the main character on top of the layer aside from the background layer, which is nakikita nyo doon sa left side kanina. Continuing, meron tayong layer properties. Okay? Na kung saan each layer that you add to the room will have its own properties, and those properties will change depending on the layer type. So, ang mangyari lang dito is you can check for the layer properties doon sa dimensions, okay, doon sa height, or basically lahat ng details or information for each layer is nandun sa layer properties. Okay, this window permits you to change those properties as well and edit how layers will be rendered. So, ayun lang yun doon sa layer properties natin. You can preview the details and even edit the values sa layer properties. Room properties have the number of properties too, and this can be set here. Things like room size, the camera viewports that are active, lahat ng yun is set naman doon sa mismong room properties. So, basically, mas malaki yung isang room. So within the room, we have layers that can be managed by layer properties, and the whole room itself can be managed and processed by the room properties. The first type of room resource natin is yung tinatawag natin na background layer. The background layer is a layer that can be filled with a single color or a single image. Usually, ito yung mga images that are nakalagay doon sa pinaka-babang layer dahil sila yung background or area kung saan maglalakad or magta-travel yung iyong character. So basically, may bundok sa background, may forest sa background, may desert sa background. Yun lang yung pinaka-purpose niya. Kung nasa dagat, yun yung ipapakita mong background. So that is the background layer. The next one is meron tayong instance layer. Like let's say for example, meron kang mga usually ito yung nag-handle or nag-contain ng mga objects mo that are happens that could happen to have multiple instances, like for example may mga enemies ka, may mga player ka doon sa mismong ano mo, basically yung mga actors mo inside your game. Okay, yung mga gumagalaw, yung may mga merong events, may mga actions, dito mo sila ilalagay doon sa instance layer. So pwede ka rin maglagay ng multiple instance layer kung ayaw mo silang nakapatong sa isa't isa. The next one is we have the tile map layer. And dati, when it comes to, ano ba yun, when it comes to Game Maker 1, wala tayong tile map layer specific. Pero dito kasi ang nangyayari is kanina, kung sa instance layer is lahat ng may mga objects, may mga actions. Dito sa tile map layer, ito yung mga static na mga things na makikita natin sa game, like yung mga background, yung mga poste, yung mga daan, yung mga props. Usually nilalagay sila sa tile map layer dahil expected na hindi naman sila magkakaroon ng any process or functions. Next is path layer. If like let's say for example, meron kang gustong gawin or meron kang gustong iset na certain movement, certain places or certain directions na gagalawin ng mga objects mo inside of your room, pwede kang by default mag-set ng mga or mag-create ng mga default paths that will be used by your objects dun sa mismong game maker para sundan, para i-trace at para gamitin scripted na paggalaw. Next is meron tayong asset layer. It simply takes a sprite resource and draws it using the parameters that you set when you add it into the room. So basically, ang nangyayari lang is this manage yung mga different sprites resources natin doon sa mismong layer. Ayun lang siya. Okay? So, talking more about tile sets. Tile sets are created from sprites. Basically, these are also under doon sa sprite resource natin. Yun nga lang kinakategorize natin sila as a separate things aside from the objects na merong actions. Okay? Essentially, a tile is simply graphical resource that gets drawn to the screen with a very little processing power under sa GPU or dun sa CPU, Central Processing Unit, or dun sa graphics natin. Kasi, alam ng game maker or kapag alam niya na tile siya nakaset, it means na wala naman siyang any specific requirements aside dun sa ipapakita niya lang siya sa screen. So, basically, kaya kasi nasabi ko kanina, tile set are just images that are static on the background. Okay? So, to start with, we need to have a tile set image. So, ang mangyayari kasi dito, parang meron kang list or meron kang array. No? Mas tipid ito aside from dun sa sprite na iisa-isahin mo kung meron kang iba't ibang klase ng mga tiles. Pero pwede kang mag-create ng isang klase lang ng tile kagaya na nakikita nyo on screen. Tapos, you will just be calling kung anong specific na index ng tile yung gagamitin mo. Okay? So, this which would be done in the sprite editor image, so you can do it or you can create it using the sprite editor now, which is na built-in na dun sa game maker version 2 natin. And the final sprite would look something na kagaya niya na nakikita ninyo na it can be differentiated per individual tile at yung unang tile is black siya, kaya siya checkered. The next one is, sinasabi dito under sa tile resource pa rin is, with a sprite created, we can go ahead and define a tile set, which means you have to first create a new tile set resource by right-clicking the tile set resource. So, ayun lang, simply speaking, doon sa mismong tile set resource natin, mag-create ka lang doon. Okay? So, ang mangyayari lang is, this will open the tile set editor, kagaya lang ng pag-add ng sprite, pag-add ng objects, tapos doon mo na pwedeng i-call or ilagay yung sprite mo. We have set a tile based on the example to 32 pixels, and we have left the rest of the values at their default since we have no need of offsets or anything for those different tile sets. Ayun lang siya. Ito yung example natin ng isang tile set na may 32 pixels. Next, when we are, syempre, dahil sa games natin, because games are interactive multimedia, meron tayong mga images, meron tayong mga text na, which are done by draws and image editor. Meron tayong also mga animation, that is included. So, meron rin tayong part ng multimedia which is all about audio, no? Which is ngayon, ito yung under naman sa Game Maker, which is yung pag-manage ng mga yon using the sound resources. All games have to have sound effects from the kapag nabaril, okay, kapag sumabog yung item na yon or what. Basically, ito yung nagbibigay buhay when it comes dun sa game natin. And dito, you will be using this sinatawag natin na sound editor. Okay? Whenever you create a new sound resource. Same, iloload mo lang yung file na yon sa iyong resource directory and then dilito tong editor na to or yung preview na to para dun sa sound if you want to play it or check on it kung ano ba yung mga details under dun sa sound na yon. Sound in games, Game Maker Studio can be uncompressed and compressed kasi meron tayong 2 file types that you can use or 3 file types that you can use here. Uncompressed sounds, kapag sinabi natin compressed is yung kanyang resolution, yung size, yung kanyang quality. So kapag mas mababa yung size, syempre compression, pero yung quality sometimes suffer. So uncompressed files daw are WAV files. Okay, while compressed sounds can either be MP3 or OGG. Kasi sinaunang format yung OGG, and OGG format ng audios are usually close to dun sa AMR. Medyo pangit na yung audio. Pero ngayon, kasi common natin na ginagamit si MP3 format, which is ginagamit natin ngayon sa mga audios natin. In general, you want a small sound effects to be WAV. Okay? Because these are very common, no? Yung mga WAV files natin, these are commonly being triggered. For example, bumabaril ka, nagsasalita yung character mo, pwede mo silang iset into an uncompressed na file. Okay? Para at least yung quality kapag magpe-play or ipapakita yon sa mismong game is hindi siya murdered or murdered. Okay? So basically, yung mga background music daw or yung mga background sounds can be simply OGG or MP3 as yung mga yan ay naka-loop or naka-rotate sila. Dahil, ano ba yun, mahahaba usually yung mga kanta na yan. For example, isang 5-minute na background music would tapos hindi siya compress na gagamitin mo, malaking kakainin niya na audio size or dun sa game mo pa lang sa isang MP3 or lahat ng MP3 mo, malaki na siya. So, you should compress them to MP3 or OGG files. Okay? And kagaya ng ibang mga resources natin, kung sa sprite, we have SPR. Kung sa object natin, we have OGJ. Sa sound resource, you should name convention it as SND. Adding sound is as simple as clicking the add sound button, kagaya lang rin ng sprites, and then browsing dun sa Explorer, dun sa location nyo sa inyong mismong PC. And kapag may na-select na load na, mapipreview na yun dun na merong playback, lahat ng mga functionality, play, previews, next, cut, and so on. Yung details, yung bitrate will be shown. And if you aren't sure about this, simply leave everything as is. Kung wala ka nang gustong iset by default, either way, pwede naman yun as is by default kung wala ka ng specifications for the file format ng sound resource mo. So, leave it as is. Pero kagaya nga ng pinag-usapan natin kanina, usually kapag malaki ang files, you should use the compressed version which is MP3 and OGG. Okay? Pero yung mga maliliit lang na usually constantly nagagamit and it needs quality, you can use the uncompressed format which is the WMV. Okay? That's it. So, yun lang yung magiging yun yung buong discussion natin for the whole, for the whole module number 2. Pasensya na, it took me almost an hour and a half, no, for the video. Pero, ayun lang, all of these things will be a part of your examination, but mainly kapag kikreate ako ng exams kasi I am mainly focusing on what is written dun sa module. So, check on the module as well and read it, no? Binabasa nyo naman, di ba, yung mga modules. Okay. So, yun yung magiging basis natin for the exam natin na mangyayari this week. Okay guys, see you next module.